This is John MacKay with another session of Extracting the Best of Every Day with Dr. John MacKay. And with myself today is Josh Rutherford, VP of Corporate Development for the Agrify Extraction Division, as well as co-founder of Pure Pressure. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, thanks, Dr. MacKay. It's awesome to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's a good session. I think one of the things that we were just talking about off camera was a lot of people look at extraction and they're thinking about a solvent-based extraction, or they're thinking about how it works with ethanol or propane, butane. But a lot of the things that people miss is the efficacy of how you can take a plant itself and being able to, extracting the trichomes at different sizes, as well as from there pressing in a ethical way. I do go back to one thing that I always like to start off the show was, and that is, what is the best extraction or concentration? And that is, B stands for the botanical integrity of the plant. And it doesn't matter what the plant is. In this case, we're going to be talking a lot about cannabis, but it's the integrity of the natural components. After that, if you want to start to do other things with them, start to decarboxylate or to add things, take things out, that's the prerogative. But the real goal is on the first one is just to be able to take and have the plant itself. And E out of best is extraction, efficacy, efficiency, economy. And efficacy comes first, making sure that what you have is ethical, so that you're giving something to the user, the patient themselves, that they're getting that true product that's safe. And economy and efficiency come afterwards. And so some of the things that we'll be able to talk about, I'm curious about, is the efficiency. And certainly there's a lot of different ways of doing solventless extraction. We'll talk about some of those. S out of best is safety, and safety throughout the entire process. And so within that, I go all the way back to the growing. I go back to the early days of watching people spray pesticides inside of hangars, and that was kind of alarming. But it's also all the way to the growing, where even in the early days of the trimming, watching, scissors from CVS, and you're just going, oh my gosh. And meanwhile, you're petting the dog next to you. And that's part of the safety, all the way through the process of the equipment itself. And I think that's some of the things that I want to touch on and kind of curious about with Pure Pressure and some of the products that they've made that on the safety side. And T on best is for testing with modern technology. And that not only goes with the testing of the product itself, whether it's a COA or the process, but also, when you're designing something, is it going to be safe? And so that you have the ability of making sure that something under a certain amount of pressure is not going to break and spray everything all over the place. And I think those are some of the things I'm curious about too. But as I go through, before I even get to the part of the components themselves, I'm always curious about how someone moved into this technology. And I'm the old guy, so I'm 68 along the way. But as I'm going through, I'm watching these young inventors come in with some true CAD designs and other things. But I'm guessing it didn't start off with a CAD design right off at first.
No.
How'd you get into this?
Yeah, I mean, always been very passionate about the plant since the very early on days in the industry. I was fortunate enough to go to University of Colorada, Boulder. Was engrossed in Colorado's market, which was the first to legalize and go medical. So it was an amazing opportunity to hop into the green rush, as I like to call it, on the early on days. It was started in the growing and being so fascinated, by the plant. And, it was the trichome heads, when are they ripe? And, people are growing for genetics and breeding, certain genetics for different types of extraction, let alone flower. and you can have the best of all worlds. And I strongly believed that. And there was people doing hydrocarbon extraction. There was people doing, going straight to distillation through like an ethanol process or, a CO2 process. But solventless wasn't, known for being a viable type of, extraction. And so me hearing that, with the entrepreneur mindset, basically, looked at what people were doing in the hydrocarbon community, the technologies that we're able to adopt. And, I think that's key here. I'm not about repurposing equipment. I believe that, the industry needs industry specific equipment, because of the finicky and finesse associated with the different types of genetics. There's a right time and a right place for every single genetic. And I think the breeders right now and the push that they're making right now, will be having grows that can go to all three types. And it's going to be up to those growers, whether or not they want to sell to a lab or they're fully integrated or they want to take it all the way to flower, whatever the best situation is for that grow in today's market. Because as we know, depending on which state you're in, it's like a roller coaster up there with the pricing.
It is, and there's three things that always come to my mind. There's a speed, scale, and selectivity.
Mm-hmm.
And through those processes, I mean, if someone's doing collecting the trichomes and selecting the trichomes from a specific variety or strain, and then from there making their own product at home, that's pretty much how I'd first seen a lot of the different water hash or different types of collection of the trichomes. And on your side, starting off with the plant itself and understanding, okay, this is how the trichome is grown. This is the chemical biosynthesis of the CBGA. So I'll start off with CBGA or the terpenes. And then from there, you go through the synthases. The synthases make the next specific isomer of a cannabinoid, the THCA or the CBDA. And what you're trying to do is capture that on the from what I hear, or what I feel from you, and that is B. B is the very most important part of best for you because it moves into the E.
Yep.
And so you're collecting those trichomes. So from a different variety of plant, do you see what is the trichome for our audience?
Yeah. So I mean, when you have a stalk, you have a neck, and you have a head. Now the head is, what we all consider full melt bubble hash. And that's if you're going for ice water types of extraction. And full melt would be that cleanest, bubble hash experience. And that's normally between a 72 and a 120 micron head size. So basically you have different screens as you go through your ice water extraction. So you have all your biomass, you're agitating it with ice water, and then you're filtering it in multiple areas of basically like a filter stack. So you'll have your 220 up here and your 25 down here and a bunch of different grades in between. Now, as you're filtering that water through, those heads based on the size, whether or not it's a broken head, a stalk, or just that entire head, which is the goal. Now, those heads are very delicate. If they're mishandled, they basically just explode. They literally are, you can ruin your full melt bubble hash just as much, growing it, harvesting it, agitating it. So all of those are crucial components to having success in ice water type of extraction. Now, what I will say about the head and solventless extraction specifically is, so you have your stalk, and then you want your neck to be very thin, ready to break off of that head. So that head is so big and that's the type of genetic that it wants to break off from a little bit of agitation and just falls off. And normally the temperature of the water is one of those key indicators, not as much the agitation. The agitation is very important, but you can be very delicate with the agitation. That's why you see a lot of people prefer to hand wash over automated washing. Now, people have washers with vortexes on the bottom, but the RPMs that those take, can you create full melt hash? Absolutely. But can you create the maximum amount of full melt hash? My answer would be no. People might disagree with me because of the agitations and RPMs that you're moving that water and how much clashing it's doing within that ice water extraction. That's why when we decided to develop our ice water extraction automated unit, we went top feed, trying to replicate what people are doing from a paddle, but having the repeatability, consistency, and recipes and patterns. So basically your patterns that you would pre-record then could be created into a recipe. Now that recipe could be for that specific strain because that's how you maximize your yield of that strain. Now Joe Schmo can come on this equipment now and get that same exact result. So that is the key, as well as scale, right? You can scale by doing different batch sizes, different vessels, but moving them in and out of the agitator, because the agitator should be agitating in my eyes at all times. You should be filtering over here. You should, it shouldn't always be housed in your agitation machine. So we took a completely, different angle associated with ice water extraction than a lot of different companies who, would consider us competitors. I really love the push and the innovation that we're seeing in every single type of extraction, as well as genetics and breeding and growing. Like the VFUs are amazing. The hydrocarbon side of things, the way people are automating there is amazing. But, when it comes to solventless extraction, it's the most delicate, and going back to being the viable side of things, not every genetic works for solventless extraction. You have your gelatos, you have your, more chem dogs, GMO, everyone will say GMO hits its numbers, and there's those different components of those genetics. Some things are more water soluble than others. You end up losing a lot in the water and ice water extraction. So maybe you want to go to maybe a SIF type of technology. Now, going back to agitating on a micron level, you're collecting all of those heads. And like I said earlier, 72 to 120 is going to be your full melt. You'll see when you're scooping it out, because then you're going to place it into trays, and then it's going to go into a freeze dryer. And that freeze dryer is going to freeze dry for 24 hours, 12 to 24 hours. And then basically you'll pull it out. You'll keep your full melt if that's what you want to do. Or you can just bring it all to rosin, and you'll have your 25U, you'll have whatever micron stack that you did for your ice water extraction, and then you'll be able to go into your press. Now you can keep those isolated into those microns. You can combine them, whatever the user wants to do at that point, or whatever makes sense for their business model, right? You could make bubble joints from it. So a lot of different components. And then when they're going and pressing that, they're basically liquefying that trichome, those trichomes, the stalks, the heads, depending on whatever they're putting in that press, using heat and pressure to press down on that bubble hash to get a higher yield. Can you press flour? Absolutely. You're going to end up with your traditional 10 to 25% yields. But when you concentrate into bubble hash first, not only do you have multiple SKUs you can create from that bubble hash, but you have multiple SKUs that you can create post-production and have different grades of different types of rosin. Now, to make all your other SKUs that you see, diamonds, pens, all of those things, that's all post-processing from what you end up pressing.
So when I'm looking at each one of those, there's a couple of things that come to mind. Number one is physics. just because I'm leaning towards the science side, and the other side is random analogies. And so it does seem like you've gone into the spring pond and collected the tadpoles.
Yeah.
And you're trying not to kill all the tadpoles, but you're still trying to get them out of the I won't call it the seaweed, but the algae that's growing in there. And I'm not sure that fits at all, but it's a word picture that came into mind, and I had to articulate it, or I'd just die. So you're taking the tadpoles, you're being careful with them, you're making sure they're okay, so that later you can either sell them as frogs, or you can crush them up. It's either side. But when you're looking at that analogy of now taking those trichomes, and if you want to bring them into a rosin, for example. So my first experience with that was doing my own home chemistry and taking out my GE clothes iron and bringing it up to a certain temperature that was acceptable, that I could see, and then putting it on wax paper, and then 2 layers of the wax paper, because you don't want it. If you got to iron your clothes afterwards, it's a tough go to have spreading rosin all over your shirt, and everyone notices. It's kind of like walking into a cat store with cat food on you, catnip on you. And so when you're bringing that technology, what were the steps that brought you to decide that this was a good idea to bring in, chemical engineering?
Yeah. I mean, so my business partner in the venture, Ben Britton, he was a mechanical engineer, and I knew the plant very well. So when we got together, we wanted to figure out, everyone's methodology was, let's get it to, about 200 degrees and let's hit it with as much pressure as we possibly can. And we're like, whoa, all right, let's take a step back here. What is the most ideal pressure? Now, when you look at a type of hydrocarbon, extraction unit, you look at, their dewaxing, or ethanol. Your solvent is so cryogenically cold now that you don't necessarily even have to have that dewaxing component. Now you have to think about the same thing as when you go into your rosin press. So when you're going into your rosin press, you want to, when you're hitting it at as much pressure, let's smash it as hard as we can, and get all the juices out. You're also pulling your fats, your lipids, all those undesirables that you don't want. And your pressure per square inch, and there's a great article on this that we put out, and graphs and all sorts of fun stuff showing that the pressure per square inch is very important based on your bag size and your plate size. So it's always on your bag size, not necessarily your plate size. And the reason that is because your plates should never really actually be coming into contact. They're coming into contact with the surface area over your plates. Now, also a thin and narrow, you don't want square. A lot of people are repurposing, let's say, hair straighteners or t-shirt presses, to be doing these types of extraction. Well, that's all fine and dandy and everything, but I was frustrated with another venture of mine, of wanting to be in solventless extraction, which is why, we're like, all right, we got to make a rosin press, the ice water, and then we're going to get to ice water extraction, because there wasn't the viability and there was that stigma associated with solventless extraction. That just couldn't be, there's no way that this type of extraction was getting that stigma, because in my opinion, it is the cleanest, purest, type of extraction, most flavorful that you can be able to consume. And I look at it versus organic versus non-organic food that you buy in a grocery store, and that's the price points that you see in today's market. You go into any dispensary, it doesn't matter where you are, your solventless extraction is going to be fetching that top dollar. Now, solventless extraction versus, like a hydrocarbon extraction, they're both great, but you're basically comparing to an organic or non-organic produce that you might be buying in your grocery store. And that's the price points that I think we'll continue to see today in today's market and beyond. And, the more breeders who are breeding for, all types of extraction and flower and combining that, it's going to be up to the extractor or up to the grower where they bring that product each time to fetch the highest dollar and make their business the most viable. It is really important, in my opinion, to have industry specific equipment again and be looking at it from a scientific standpoint. And I joke about it all the time. We got to take the stoner science out of it, and when designing and developing this equipment with my business partner, Ben, we didn't want to change how people wanted to do things in this industry. Everybody's a master grower, which is totally fine. Everyone's a head extractor, which is totally fine. So I'm going to give you the best equipment possible and you can operate it. I want you to be able to operate it the way you want to. I'm going to tell you how I think you should operate it. But hey, play with it the way that you want to. And, please give me the feedback. I'm not saying I'm 100% right. I want to be proven wrong. I want you to innovate, on this piece of equipment and have the ability to do it. So the way that you're able to control this equipment, far outweighs using a hair straightener or a repurposed t-shirt press or those type of things, as well as you can build recipes. Like I was talking in the ice water extraction, same type of methodology in the rosin pressing, where you can build recipes per strain in different stages. So, how it goes through, what pressure you're hitting at, you can have a first press, second press, because I'm not saying don't hit it with everything you got. What I'm saying is first press, maybe don't pull those fats and lipids. So you can make your premium grade A, first press, then hit it with everything you got, make your second press, because there's a customer for both. You look at it like a red label to blue label, depending on, where you're at, and what you want to drink, that's where you're going to end up going in your price point that you can hit.
I think it brings an interesting facet to the industry, and it allows, based on what I've seen, it allows you to have a price point for the customer's need, whether it's personal or whether it's a small business or whether it's a larger business that's providing products for a dispensary, and that company is going to want to have a reproducible product that's going to the dispensary. Mm-hmm. Each one of those things becomes important. So you have the FP, SP, and TP. I guess TP would be toilet paper. That'd be your third press. But as you're going through each one of those, you have a product that they're willing to understand where that comes from. Mm-hmm. I think the other part that I had seen as a word picture, and that was you have your lasagna noodle.
Yeah.
Or
know where you're going with this.
Yes, and then you have the thin one. So because it allows you not to have so much heat based on pressing, mm-hmm. because there's going to be welcome to the 3 laws of thermodynamics. I'm sorry, it still works for cannabis. The 3 laws of thermodynamics are not exclusive to the chemistry laboratory, but when you do that and you press something, you're going to generate heat. There has to be a release of energy, and in this case, entropy and enthalpy, delta G, it all works. Mm-hmm. And so, is that why you're using thinner plates and then multiples of those? And how does that? And I'm sure that the blog, I have not read the blog, but I'd be interested to see how the blog correlates to that sort of information.
So each plate size that we release in each of our pieces of equipment correlate to a certain tonnage within that equipment. So if you max out that plate, our goal was if you max out the bag size that fits within that plate, that you would be able to achieve that maximum PSI in order to get the best of the best types of extraction. So we built our press around, that, which is why we have a 5 and 7 ton press instead of some of the 20 ton presses that you see out there. We also decided to build on pneumatics. instead of hydraulics. Now, if you go into a lot of food grade facilities, you don't see a lot of hydraulics out there either. And as well as the material, we take very seriously, the compliance that is going to be coming down the road within the meshes that you're using. You look at tea bags, you look at all sorts of different consumables that are food grade, but does it fit for this use? And when going into how your plate size correlates and your temperatures, we still leave that up to the user to set those parameters based on what they want to do. But, we definitely give them, a good starting point with some presets. And you can preset, and save so many recipes for so many strains. You might be able to fill out your entire genetic library within the press. So any person at that time can come in and press. Now, you already know if there's a variable in your grow. So you can correlate that to maybe it extracted different. Or maybe there's no variability in your grow and you ran that same recipe. Well, now you can, talk about your user of that piece of equipment, not necessarily blaming the machine or, the product itself. It's taking the guesswork out of it. And I think that's what's the most important in the industry right now is that data associated with repeatability and consistency.
Because as I look at that, if I was to look at it on a simple form, then I would have most people saying, well, how tough can it be to make a press? I mean, how tough can it be to make a press, for goodness sake?
Yeah.
And I can do that. You can. But when you're a company and you're providing products for a dispensary that's got a rather large name, and you can look at some of the dispensaries out there that have significant coverage across the United States or across the city, the last thing they're needing is providing a solution. They're not going to provide an avenue for someone to sell their material if it's not reproducible and the customers don't have a good satisfaction. I'm guessing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that In-N-Out burger, it tastes the same in Vegas as it does in California, and that is important, so, and that's why I think that they've spread so, so slow, and, there's a lot of them out there, but they, want it to, hold that same taste, that same flavor, and that same business model. And that's what we need within our genetics, our, recipes, all of those things. Because if you're going to an MSO and that's who in your state and you're going to buy it in another state, you should be able to have some of those consistencies throughout that product. Same thing going back to red label to blue label. It doesn't matter what liquor store you're going to buy it in, it tastes the same.
Which is why I'm not a big fan of In-N-Out burger. There's different products I like of it, but I'm not a big fan of the French fries. I don't know why.
I'm right there with you.
I'm not. I just, maybe In-N-Out burger will send me a coupon and see if they'll change my mind. But I don't know why it is.
Talking their burgers, not their French fries. Let's be clear here.
Let's be clear. I don't know. But the reason I won't go to an In-N-Out burger and order French fries is because I know they are reproducible from place to place.
Exactly.
What do you got?
Exactly.
What do you got? So as I'm looking at that, so then through this model, you and Ben started this, and from my understanding, it started at just a social event, and then from there, thought maybe you might make a couple of these, and maybe a couple of friends would buy them, and out of serendipity and either good luck or bad luck, it's turned into a significant business that it actually, by the time it was done, caught a major organization called Agrify, and they came in and made another major investment. But it wasn't as though one day you guys were sitting at a breakfast table in a breakfast restaurant and said, "Hey, Boulder, what the hey, we ought to make one of these." And Agrify called up and said, "Wow, this looks like a good piece of paper on a napkin. Let's go with it." So yeah. What was that route?
Oh man, I mean, it was a journey. So, we made a Frankenstein model to kind of prove some of the scientific backing that we thought about. And we put some, made it pretty on a CAD image, to make
Yeah.
sure that we knew, we had the frame, we had the structure, we had everything that, we needed to make it into a product. And we're like, okay, let's see what the market thinks about it. So we released it on Instagram, and you're like, throw it at us, folks. And the inquiries were unbelievable. And so we ended up selling the first 10, I think, in the first week that we released those CAD images. And that's what Ben and I literally hand wired, hand welded everything within these units. And the other component that I really want to make a point on is those people who bought those first 10 units are able to have the technology that we have today. They have the touch screen compared to the little keypad that we put on there. They're able to update the firmware. We made these things and engineered them. The skill set of, Ben and the team that has helped us create this was absolutely amazing to service if it needed to be serviced. Now, the product itself is a beast. It is a workhorse. It shouldn't have any issues or errors or anything along those lines relating to not being the next iPhone, for example, where it's obsolete the next, year.
Yeah.
And, the customer service support, behind the products is there. If our customers are having issues, we also have, training and consulting, to make sure that, our customers are successful, within our equipment, because, cannabis is a learning curve. Solventless extraction is a learning curve. And we want everyone to be as successful as we possibly can. It's really an interesting industry and how it's shaping out. I am very excited to be a part of it. It's a blessing that we grew it into what we did. So we started the company in 2015, and we were acquired, Jan 1 of 2022. December 31st, 21. But in Jan 1, Ben and I and the entire peer pressure team hopped on board of Agrify. And, it has given us the tools and resources that we need we had a whole product, plan and, mission for the next 3 years, right? Well, now we can accelerate that. Now we have more and more resources, more team members from some of the other acquisitions, and like-minded entrepreneurs from other avenues of different types of extraction, all in one room. It is truly remarkable to be working with the people that I get to work with, which is one of the main, reasons of when Agrify approached us, of taking them very seriously on what they're trying to accomplish in the cannabis space, because what their vision is exactly what this industry needs. And to be able to be at the forefront of that and continue to be able to be a part of the corporate development of that and the industry is a blessing to me. Just as much as, do I want to proceed on my career? Absolutely. But, it is really about pushing the industry forward for me.
So you must have had to, just based on what you're, talking with you, and that is, you had to be interviewing them more than they were interviewing you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, was it a right choice? Was it a wrong choice? I wouldn't, take anything back. I think it is a great opportunity to be moving forward with Agrify and its partners, because it is going to take over and be the number one. We are the world's largest equipment manufacturing company out there. It is just a tremendous opportunity. I can't say enough good things about what Agrify is doing and has done.
So you get to be a Joshua amoeba.
Yeah, I guess
you're not
so.
a paramecium, so you're an amoeba. So you can kind of spread yourself out like a rosin and move some of your entrepreneurial ideas as well as your experience, and bringing that to the other divisions as well as whatever they're doing moving forward. So you get to, and because you have that plant experience, you can also, my experience with of understanding Agrify is starting off with the plant and moving from the plant and some of the AI of that. So now you're able to see where the influence is that goes through the different types of extraction mode. So it really doesn't, you're agnostic as far as of how a customer gets to be able to provide a product for the patient or customer.
Yes.
And so that's nice. I mean, that gives you a little bit of time, and you got a couple of years left before you're retiring. So I'm guessing this is, this
Yeah,
is a
I'd
good
say
thing.
so. I'd say so. You know, the stress of the, it hasn't come through yet. No. But it is, I'm really excited for the future. Being able, one of my other ventures, I've been able to touch the cannabis plant, growing it itself. I've been able to do hydrocarbon extraction, distillation, CO2 extraction, ethanol, so I've been able to touch a lot of the different components and channels of this space and of what Agrify has within their portfolio right now. So it's amazing. And those companies that they've acquired are the companies that I've had in my other venture, and it's because they are the best of the best. And we are a lot of like-minded individuals just trying to push the industry forward and give everyone the tools that they need to be successful in their business. That's the core of it. It really is, and give them the data to be even more successful.
So I have one more question before I set you free.
Mm-hmm.
And that is Colorado. Colorado's Colorado.
Yep.
And then the other states, the adjoining states, everyone say that, every state's the same. And I would argue that one. And because people need to travel around the United States and talk about cannabis and see what the reaction is from the different citizens that have grown up in a regionally based state, not those citizens that have moved around the country. Mm-hmm. But the United States of America is 50 individual countries, probably, well, actually around 52, because you got to bring in, Puerto Rico and such. And when you look at that, let's just say the United States has a one mode, and I'm not sure I believe that. And so my understanding is you've gone over to Europe. Yep. And one of the conferences over there. How did you find internationally what their feeling was with solventless versus solvent-based extractions? I'm just kind of curious of what your thoughts were.
Well, I mean, fortunately, I've been able to experience like cannabis, and some of those international countries. You have Amsterdam, you have Spain, Germany's coming online here, New Zealand, Australia. There's a lot of exciting countries coming online, but when we really look at going back in time of where hashish came from international. The market of the United States, is far ahead of where the international market is, and there's going to need to be adoption there. And hopefully they follow a little bit of the model. They're kind of going at it at two different ends of the spectrum, I see right now. And they will align eventually. But I'm very excited for what I see on the international front. I think that people are taking it very seriously right now. And, it's going to happen country by country, though. It's not like the whole entire EU is going to open up. It's going to be a specific country, what the local government is willing to do. And, I think Barcelona is a, unique one as well. Because it's similar to kind of United States, I believe, where, they have their own, province laws. I might not be using the right terminology here, but, it's a different sector of, Spain. So there's different components of why they have social clubs there, but not into the entire country. So it is a very big next step for cannabis and the movement of international expansion. And I think we'll see a lot more MSOs and a lot more equipment manufacturing companies, stuff like that, be popping up all over the world.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate all your time. And it was a great catching up with you. And finding out more about what you're thinking and where you came from and what you're doing. Other than that, I'd only known about you a little bit through the social media myself. So it was a real pleasure catching up.
Yeah, definitely appreciate you, John.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.